this evening is going to last a couple of hours, and it will be in English only, and it will bring together 14 fabulous live speakers and 4 inspiring leaders via video message. Now, this is the first online event of its kind organised by the S&D Group, so I really do commend and thank you so very much for turning up and tuning in this evening. And I think that's testament to the fact that you hold dear the values that we're going to explore and talk about this evening. Now, of course, our event falls on the eve of the 70th anniversary of the Schuman Declaration. So it's a very important occasion, and S&D have brought together diverse voices from all around Europe to share their thoughts and their ideas on the future of the European project, to put some of these progressive values like solidarity and equality under the spotlight, and to also explore, now more than ever, the importance of continuing the fight for strong democracies in Europe. Now, I'm going to leave it there because your opening speakers will talk about all of this in far more depth and detail than I. In the next 120 minutes, what does it look like? We have a rousing opening video. We then have some opening words from the S&D president, 3 fabulously inspiring messages that are coming in on video from 3 leaders. And then, of course, we go into 2 panel debates. The first is on rebuilding solidarity in Europe, and the second is on fighting for democracy in Europe. And then we will have some closing words from the Vice President of the European Green Deal and Communication, Miriam, Dalli. So a packed programme. 3 very quick tips for you so that you can make the most out of this, I hope, what promises to be a fantastic event. The first thing is, please stay with us from start to finish. It's a narrative, it's a story, so do stay with us. Secondly, I'm not in the same location as the tech team. So should technology have a mind of its own and we have a momentary blip, don't worry, just be patient. Please stay with us. Most importantly, we've tried to do something a little bit different with this event because we've tried to engage you more than other events we've all seen. So the social media team has gathered questions in the last couple of days from people all around Europe, and I am privileged to be able to pose some of those questions to the speakers in both of the panel debates. More on that later. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is literally my housekeeping done for now. So I'm very delighted to kick things off with a bang. We're going to have a video to mark the 70th anniversary of the Schuman Declaration. So sit back and relax while we get that video ready to show you. Might take a couple of minutes of delay, but there we go.
L'Europe ne se fait d'un coup, ni dans une construction d'ensemble. Elle se fera par des réalisations concrètes, créant d'abord une solidarité de fait.
Solidarity has always been at the heart of the European community. 70 years ago, on May the 9th, 1950, Robert Schuman made a revolutionary declaration. With Europe ravaged by the Second World War, Schuman planted the seed from which the European community of peace grew and blossomed. Former enemies reached out their hands in reconciliation and became friends. We opened borders and tore down the walls between us. We built the world's biggest internal market. With the continent reunified, the European family finally became whole again. Against all odds, we built a unique society in Europe where we can live together in peace and solidarity. Today, 70 years after the Schuman Declaration, Europeans are confronted with the deepest crisis since the Second World War. Too many have lost loved ones, are fighting for their own lives, or are afraid of losing their jobs, their livelihoods, their future. Still, in the midst of today's crisis, the European spirit of solidarity was rekindled. Leaving borders open for critical transports of food and medical goods, helping EU citizens travel safely home, supporting neighbouring countries with medical staff, investing massive resources to find a vaccine. In the midst of this crisis, new heroes have emerged. They are our inspiration. Now we are called upon to walk in the footsteps of Schuman to write the next chapter in our history. It is time to rebuild Europe with a new recovery plan and a heart. It is time for a Europe where workers have a good job to return to after the crisis, where companies receive a helping hand, especially in hard-hit sectors. A Europe where we harvest the energy of sun, wind and water to fuel our cars, homes and factories. A Europe where we join forces and invest in research to give citizens the healthcare they need. It is time to help each other become stronger together. It's time to be brave, to stand up and build a better future. It is time to make history again.
So that was a very helpful start because we've underscored in that video some of the key words and some of the key issues that I hope to explore with the different speakers this evening. What is the meaning of solidarity? And we're going to put some flesh on the bones of that. But before we go any further, I'm delighted to give the floor, because you just saw her in the video, to S&D President Iratxe García Pérez. So a warm welcome to this lovely lady. Hello.
Thank you very much, Katrina, and thank you also to the audiovisual team for this video. Dear colleagues, dear friends, it's time to make history again. It is time for a new beginning, and I am happy that we have this opportunity to talk together tonight. Tomorrow, we commemorate 70 years since the Schuman Declaration. That day, we started on our path of freedom, peace, and solidarity, out of the ruins of the Second World War. In these first 7 years, Europe has brought peace and prosperity to its citizens and has grown to 27 countries. It has not always been simple, but out of the difficulties, we have always managed to come out stronger. Today, we can proudly claim the motto of United in Diversity. And we, Socialists and Democrats, must also be proud of our contribution on this project. Our leadership, ideas, and people have been key actors to develop the Union. We made sure that Europe would become a true union and not just a free market. It was Jacques Delors who introduced the social dimension. The landmark came in 1989 with the Community Charter of Fundamental Rights of Workers. Since then, we have continued to build, and we will continue to do so in the future. Unfortunately, this year, the 9th of May, it's different. Our thoughts today are with all victims on the pandemic and with their families. And our thoughts are also with all those Europeans worried about the uncertainty in their future. We are facing severe emergency. However, I am confident that we will be able to come out from this stronger. The S&D Group is proposing ideas to move in the right way, to make Europe stronger, sustainable, and with a stronger social protection. The recovery is crucial for our future together, and it will require an enormous effort in almost all policies areas. At the same time, the Union must also take the climate emergency, growing inequalities, and the digital transformation. I am glad to say that we will be able to address these challenges and use the recovery efforts to rebuild solidarity. People have more and more been left behind, and the public sector has been quickened. To fix it on macroeconomic growth, we have allowed fundamental public policies, such as social security and health systems, to suffer. We are also facing the deterioration of the rule of law, a new wave of populism and nationalism in Europe. We need to strengthen European democracy and it will be discussed in the second panel. On this 9th of May, our political movement put forward an ambitious path toward recovery, but also one that tackles all the challenges we are already there before the pandemic. Friends, we need to act quickly to avoid terrible social consequences. For this, we need an ambitious recovery fund. It comes together with a real and stronger European budget based on grants, not only on loans. In addition, we need a reform of the European Monetary Union, and we need a real fiscal capacity of the EU. There are instruments to strengthen cohesion between countries and also between regions. And they are also the tools to boost our economy and common market. Already before the outbreak of COVID-19, the EU was planning a European conference to reflect and reshape its future. We need this conference more than ever, and we want to give up our input, your input. We need to make sure that this conference brings together EU institutions, citizens, stakeholders, civil society, and academia, but also that it addresses the real problems and not just some theoretical reflection. That is why we should call it Conference of the Recovery and Future in Europe. To make it a real successful, every voice must be heard. We cannot decide on the future of Europe alone in the Brussels bubble. We need the conclusion of the conference to become a new roadmap for the future of Europe. Dear friends, the European project has always been about building of better Europe. For our parents, for our grandparents, Europe meant freedom, peace, and prosperity. For our generation and the future ones, Europe must be about equality, about solidarity, and about hope. Together, we can transform this crisis into an opportunity to build a stronger, better, and more progressive Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I am, because I can see you, so you can see I'm applauding from here because we don't have a huge audience on a stage. So thank you for your very passionate words. And I really think it's important to underline, because it's a part of the discussions we have this evening, what you say, the social dimension. We need to keep the environmental and the social really front and square alongside the economic recovery if we are to achieve that recovery for all. And I also underline what you said. You said ambitious recovery fund. So thank you for setting the scene there. I know you will be back with me, because you are going to be, thankfully, part of that first panel. Before we come to the first panel, of course, ladies and gentlemen, as I said to you at the outset, we have 3 video messages from 3 inspiring leaders. So we're going to come to the first of those. And the first of those is from the President of the European Parliament, David Sassoli. So while we will just sit back and relax while we wait to technically bring that video to the screen for you. It can sometimes take a moment. Iratxe, voilà. There we are.
Cari amiche, cari compagni, 70 anni fa, il 9 maggio del 1950, Robert Schuman annuncia l'impensabile alla stampa, il progetto di riconciliazione tra Francia e Germania. Pensate, solo 5 anni dopo la fine della Seconda Guerra Mondiale, paesi che si erano combattuti decidevano di collaborare insieme. Rispondendo alla domanda di un giornalista, fu lo stesso Schuman a definire quella scelta un salto nell'ignoto. Ed invece è stata la scelta più coraggiosa e lungimirante che abbia mai fatto la politica negli ultimi 70 anni, perché da quel salto nell'ignoto nascerà l'Unione Europea. E quella dichiarazione ha reso possibile l'avvio di un percorso di pace, di cooperazione economica, ma anche di cittadinanza, grazie all'impegno dei progressisti europei come Altiero Spinelli, Jacques Delors. Abbiamo costruito uno spazio economico sempre più ampio, che è diventato uno spazio di diritto comune, uno spazio dei diritti e della cittadinanza. Abbiamo portato i diritti sociali e del lavoro al centro del progetto europeo con il pilastro sociale, con questa crisi inedita che oggi ci mette davanti alla sfida più grande della nostra generazione. Non siamo a mani nude, una sfida che richiederà alla nostra famiglia molto coraggio. Cosa ci insegna la dichiarazione Schuman? Una cosa molto importante per noi oggi, che la politica guidata dall'interesse comune e dal coraggio può agire per migliorare e cambiare la realtà, addirittura cambiare il mondo. E oggi tutta l'Europa ha bisogno proprio di questo. Noi sapremo onorare Schuman e i valori europei se sapremo trovare lo stesso coraggio e la stessa ambizione. Non usciremo da questa crisi tornando alle vecchie ingiustizie o ai vecchi modelli, ne usciremo se cambieremo in meglio la vita di tutti, ne usciremo se l'Europa sarà in grado di dimostrare concretamente che è capace di proteggere i suoi cittadini. Solo così quei valori di libertà, giustizia, diritti, uguaglianza che fondarono l'Europa diventeranno vivi, perché faranno parte ogni giorno della vita quotidiana di ogni uomo e di ogni donna europea. La politica è utile quando è coraggiosa può cambiare il mondo. Grazie a Schuman per la lezione che ci ha dato. Buon 9 maggio a tutti e viva l'Europa!
So there we heard some great words. Politics is useful when it is courageous. And we again heard the word ambition there that Iratxe had herself spoken in her opening words. So those seem to be some of the buzzwords that are going to come up in our conversation tonight. And of course, ambition, courage, revolutionary declaration, all of that is about a new beginning. So we have a second video now. It's my great pleasure to introduce the Spanish Prime Minister, Pedro Sánchez. So Iratxe, you may again relax as we get that video to the screen and we hear his message.
Este 9 de mayo conmemoramos el primer paso en la construcción de la Unión Europea. 70 años nos separan de aquel instante decisivo, un largo periodo, sin duda, en el que nuestro mundo ha experimentado toda suerte de transformaciones, de cambio, de los que hemos sido en buena medida protagonistas. Nuestro continente se ha convertido, desgraciadamente, en estos últimos meses en el epicentro de una pandemia global que no distingue entre personas, ni continentes, ni nacionalidades. Y esta crisis sanitaria somete al conjunto de la Unión Europea a una prueba decisiva, a una prueba de fuego. La respuesta ha de ser más Europa, más solidaridad y más ambición para afrontar nuestros retos comunes. Necesitamos salir de esta crisis con una Europa más unida, más fuerte, que aporte soluciones a los diferentes vertientes de la pandemia, la sanitaria, pero también la económica, la social y sin duda la democrática. Por eso ese año la celebración del Día de Europa adquiere un significado muy particular. Aquel 9 de mayo de 1950 nos recuerda la importancia de la audacia en las grandes decisiones políticas. La audacia exige hoy un plan europeo de reconstrucción económica y social, un fondo de solidaridad que, junto con un presupuesto europeo ambicioso, aborde la crisis sanitaria y las económicas y sociales, consolide la transformación ecológica, digital y social que Europa necesita sin dejar a nadie atrás. En nuestro pasaporte hay dos identidades, la de nuestros países respectivos y la de la Unión Europea. Ahora es el momento de poner por encima la segunda, porque si no sobrevive la Unión Europea, no sobrevivirán tampoco nuestras democracias nacionales. Somos un partido de los populistas europeos, somos los herederos de la mayor cantera de líderes, pensadores, activistas que trabajaron precisamente por lo que más necesita nuestro continente en este momento decisivo. La igualdad real de todos los ciudadanos y ciudadanas, por la defensa de los servicios públicos como garantía fundamental de esa unidad, por un progreso real, inclusivo, armónico. Ese legado no es solo nuestro tesoro, es además el instrumento más poderoso para ese nuevo futuro que las circunstancias presentes nos obliga a construir. Quisiera invitaros a celebrar este día con la defensa de las ideas que nos unen, porque son las que creemos sin duda, pero especialmente porque ante las circunstancias que ahora vivimos son las únicas que podrán garantizar el bienestar y el progreso de los hombres y mujeres europeos, unidos todos nosotros en comunidad. Tengamos la determinación, la audacia y la inspiración necesarias para llevarlas a cabo. Muchas gracias.
So once again, we have that word courage, and I think I just heard Iratxe there. We had a moment of truth and a decisive moment, and that echoes very much what Stiglitz recently has said also in terms of do not waste this crisis. So that seems to be something that is held very dear and being very much emphasized. So, ladies and gentlemen, in this trio of opening video messages, we're now coming to the third, and the third is from the German Vice-Chancellor and Federal Minister of Finance, Olaf Scholz. So sit back and relax, and let's hear what this gentleman has to say to us.
In the first days of May, we commemorate the end of the Second World War and the liberation from Nazi terror throughout Europe, including in Germany. Germany started a war that claimed millions. Germans committed unspeakable atrocities and devastated Europe. And yet, after the war, men and women from all over Europe, many of them social democrats, were able to come together in the spirit of reconciliation. Former enemies became friends and began to look to the future together. That is perhaps Europe's greatest historic achievement. Today, we celebrate this new beginning. 70 years ago, Robert Schuman made his famous declaration. To Robert Schuman, forging the European community would take more than a single act. Instead, Europe would need to be built on many concrete acts of solidarity. He was right. The European project means acting in solidarity. That is what we must work on every day, preserving the peace, democracy, freedom, and prosperity that we enjoy today. This vision of Europe defines the European Union, and this vision does not allow us to be complacent. It requires politics. We saw in the last financial crisis that coming up with a joint European answer was crucial. In the current crisis too, we will act together as Europeans. In any crisis, acting in a timely and targeted manner is key. And that is exactly what we are doing now. EU finance ministers built a comprehensive 540 billion euro aid package. To shield Europe's economy from Corona, we use instruments that we already have at our disposal that are tested and that work. Through the ESM, we provide financial assistance to help European countries fight the pandemic and its fallout. Through the EIB, we support European businesses, SMEs in particular. The EU COVID-19 Guarantee Fund will allow the EIB to scale up their engagement, providing loans and thereby much needed liquidity. Through SURE, EU member states can borrow money to support short-time work schemes. In essence, the program that stands for support mitigating unemployment risks in emergency works similarly to a European unemployment reinsurance system like the one I proposed. Together, we will take all necessary steps to weather the crisis. And we will also work together to get Europe restarted. The EU will create a common fund to aid our speedy economic recovery. In all this, we Social Democrats stand for solidarity. This is our message, and it is as important today as it was 70 years ago. Solidarity means work, so let's get to work. Thank you.
Make sure I'm unmuted or nobody can hear me. So those are our 3 video messages at the outset. I hope that they've given you much inspiration and food for thought, certainly have set the scene for our 2 panel debates. And we are going to move directly into the first of those panel debates, which is on rebuilding solidarity in Europe. And solidarity, I think you'll probably all agree with me, is a very big word. And we're going to unpack it with the speakers that you now see on the panel here. What does it mean at a European level? at the level of the individual, the level of member states, of citizens, of groups. How do we make it concrete, particularly at this time? And we've heard now from Iratxe, we heard there in our last video about recovery plans, ambition for that. So what does that mean? And in the context of the future MFF. So those are some of the ideas that we're going to have a look at. As you see, joining me for these discussions, we keep the President with us. That is only right and proper. Also joining us will be Nicolas Schmit, who is, of course, EU Commissioner for Jobs and Social Rights. Good evening, sir. Paul Magnette, who is Chairman of the Belgian Parti Socialiste and Mayor of Charleroi. Bonsoir. We have Luca Vicentini, who is Secretary General of ETUC. So there you go. Hello, sir. We are also joined by the Secretary General of the Young European Socialists and the International Union of Socialist Youth, and that is Anna Pirtskavaala. So hello, good evening to you. Let me just not mispronounce your name, Pirtskavaala. There you go. We're also joined this evening by Lisa Völkel. She is from Berliner Tafel, which is, well, a food bank is not even giving it the credit it deserves, but you are feeding thousands of Berliners a month. So a very powerful NGO there, very successful NGO. And of course, we are also joined by Brando Benifai, who is the head of the Italian delegation of the S&D group. And I know that he has a commitment, but he will be with us in time for questions. So we've got about 45 minutes to wrestle with a huge topic, rebuilding solidarity in Europe. So perhaps we can see some of those speakers on screen with me now. Ladies and gentlemen of the audience, just for you to understand, we can have a maximum of 6 speakers on screen at the same time. So you can't see everybody at the same time, but when I do engage them one-on-one, we will be able to see them. That's the limits of the platform. I'm going to ask each of my speakers an open question. They're going to give a lovely punchy response. I'm going to have a chat with them. Speakers, because I can't see you when you're not on screen, if you really need to butt in at some point in our second round, you need to send me something in the private chat and I'll have a look at that. And then, ladies and gentlemen, the questions that came in from Facebook that were harvested in the last few days, those are the ones that I will then pose to our speakers. So I'm actually going to go directly back to Iratxe, if I may. I have a question for you because I think it was the Spanish Prime Minister then who sort of raised this issue, the risk for the EU. You know, this is absolutely critical, you know, the EU, for the EU's survival, and what it's going to do now is hugely important. So let me ask you, would you share that view? I mean, if we don't succeed, is there a risk for the EU?
Of course, certainly. I think that there is a real risk because the citizens can feel that Europe is not near to them in this exceptional crisis. And I'm sure that we will can finish the health crisis. I'm sure. But we need to do it with a stronger European project, because if not, the people will feel and will believe that Europe is not the solution, and the populism and nationalism will increase. For that, maybe in the first step, in the first weeks with this crisis, the citizen could feel that Europe was forgetting the situation, no, and the reaction of the different member states were in the action, but Europe it was lost.
Yeah.
And now I think that we could understand that the European institutions need to think in a strong project, in a strong solution. Solution that be based in solidarity, and the solidarity cannot be an empty word. We need to understand that in this moment it's very important to understand that the global crisis are affecting in some countries with special suffer, and these countries will need more help than others. And we are speaking about solidarity, but we are speaking about single market and about how can we do sustainable our common market, no? For that, we are working in the strong position. As you know, in the last plenary, the European Parliament approved a resolution to ask solidarity, to ask a strong action, to ask for this recovery plan, and the recovery plan with money to support the member states, with money to support the people, the workers who are losing their jobs. And we need to understand that this crisis cannot be with the same solution that the last crisis in 2008, because the austerity cannot be the solution. In the opposition, we need to reinforce, and we need to do more stronger our public sectors, health, education, care service, and in our point of view as a Social Democrats, we need to support and to push more intention and more work in this way. Thinking in the social dimension, of course, we need to keep our priorities, the new Green Deal, the digitalization, but we cannot forget the social dimension and the people who will be more affected in this crisis.
Thank you. And I also thank you for being very straightforward at the start by saying, I think perhaps at the beginning people might have thought that, you know, with Europe, there was a little bit of a sense of where is Europe in this? There was lots of, you know, very knee-jerk, understandably, responses from member states, but the European dimension, the added value, took a while to come in. But you've certainly laid out there what the stakes are and the challenges going forward to be able to combine all of these factors in the recovery to make sure it's fair. Now, ordinarily, I would have 100 questions and I would keep you with me for many minutes longer, but I can't. But I am going to come back to you later, but I am going to move on to Nicolas Schmit now. I have a question for him because we're going to come in on another side of things, very critical. Hello, sir. You have the ubiquitous books behind you. I applaud you for that. Thank you very much. Let me ask you, because you're the Commissioner for Jobs and Social Rights, so good God, you must be busy at the moment. What does the Commission plan to do in order to really save jobs? This is a critical moment, and as we've heard, to ensure no one's left behind. And there again, this relationship between the EU and the member states, how can we get everyone working together to recover from the crisis? And in the light of that, how does solidarity fit into all that for you, EU and member states, and making sure nobody's left behind in terms of jobs?
Well, good afternoon. Well, it's a great pleasure to be part of this panel, and I think the real issue is about jobs, about people, about people's future. And I think we are living in a very uncertain time, and nobody has to remind the deepness and the seriousness of this crisis, exceptional crisis. And the uncertainty we are going through, they are numerous, because we have the problem, could there be a second wave of the virus? What is the international environment? How does that go? And then there is this uncertainty you just mentioned. What is Europe capable of doing? Is Europe capable of really responding to this major exceptional challenge? And this is a question many citizens, many companies are just asking. And a lot depends on the feeling and at the end of the response Europe is able to give. And this is what is at stake, because if we are not able to give a bold and rapid response, well, I give you a very easy answer. We will have a deeper crisis, and we will have more unemployment, and we will have a real social and at the end a political crisis in Europe. So this is the question. So there is no magic solution against unemployment. There is one basic solution. First, we have to have our macroeconomic policies right. And this means in this time, we have to invest, we have to have an ambitious, as Iratxe said, and others, we have to have a very ambitious recovery fund, recovery plan, with a very strong MFF, with the right resources and the right composition of these resources, grants and loans, but especially also grants. We have to put into a move European policies. It's not just country X financing something in country Y. It's financing in common, a change in European policies, a response to this crisis. And this is the best solution to limit the explosion of unemployment everywhere. In those countries where unemployment will be higher, and in those countries which are probably more fit to come faster out of this crisis, but nobody will be able to come out of this crisis alone. We come out together, or Europe will be in a very bad and troubled period and go through a lot of uncertainties with uncertain consequences.
Okay, so
this is my point. And here, I think I just remember what Sassoli said. Well, you have to have courage, especially at special moments. When Schuman proposed his declaration, it was 5 years after the Second World War. And he said to Germany, come on board, you're part of Europe. We construct, we build something together. And this is the challenge we are facing. And here we have to be bold and we have to show courage.
Thank you very much. And I think I was going to come back to you with a question, but you sort of answered it about how do we ensure that what could be seen as disparate member states sort of reacting on their own come together, as you said, is so important. And you echoed those words of Sassoli. But let's expand a little bit later, because I'm going to get everybody's introduction first. You have reiterated, you said bold and rapid response, that funding is very important, but we also, the importance of grants as opposed to loans. So we have to look at what that funding is as well. I will come back to you. I'm going to move on, thank you very much, to Paul Magnette, President of the Belgian Parti Socialiste and Mayor of Charleroi. And hello to you. Hello. Your party is working very hard on a 4-phase COVID, what would you call it, response. And each phase has at different levels, the European, the local, if I'm correct, the national, so very, very mixed level, as it should be. What in that is the role for the EU? Do they need to perhaps have to give more transformative guidelines, sort of a framework for some kind of new development model? And if it is a new model, can the socialist family, are they the ones who need to take the helm in taking that forward?
Well, thank you, Katrina. Very happy to be with you tonight for this important meeting on this very important day. Yes, indeed, we try to react very rapidly because we think we as socialists have the responsibility to show to the citizens that we have a vision and that we have an answer to this very important crisis. And I'm very pleased that at European level, the SD family and the Party of European Socialists have been the first to put forward a new vision and a new proposal to answer this crisis. So we are very strong because of the support of our European family. And if you asked me, you didn't, but if you asked me which is the most important level, local, regional, national, or European, I would answer, of course, Europe is the most important, but whatever we will do at local, regional, or national level will not be strong enough if we don't have a strong, coordinated, and bold and ambitious action at European level. And I think we need to take just 3 elements and to keep it short. First, we need a Europe of health. It's incredible to see that we are the richest region in the world. We are the champion in the world in terms of R&D and especially in biotech. And yet, in the same time, we experience shortages and we experience breaks in the supply chain. This is impossible. I mean, and we absolutely need a coordination, a European coordination, if we want to produce vaccines and treatments and make sure that all European citizens will get it for free because the European member states will be supported in this. And this is a very concrete act of solidarity in the spirit of the Schuman Declaration. Second, sorry to be blunt, but we need money. We need money. I mean, the European Union, the member states, the regions, the local authorities, they all need to invest. This implies first that we need to completely revise the Stability Pact. And we all have to support Paolo Gentiloni, our commissioner who has launched an evaluation and revision of the Stability Pact. The Stability Pact impedes us from investing, and we need to move from a Europe of austerity that we've lived for the last 10 days to a Europe of investments, and therefore we need a revision of the Stability Pact, but we also need new armed resources. When I look at the proposals put on the table by the President of the European Council, I mean, I just want to cry that we can't live with that sort of budget. We need a European treasury. We need a real European budget that will make sure that we have enough financial means to support all the policies that we have. And also when I look, and I feel sorry if I do not fully agree with my friend Olaf Scholz, but when I look at the proposal put forward by the ministers of finance, I want to tell them, well, this is just a drop in the ocean. We need much more than that if we want to be in a capacity to give the right answers and make sure that Europe will be the project and the ambition that the new generations need. And third, to be short again, we need an ambitious vision, but we've got it. I mean, the Green Deal, we put the Green Deal on the table already before the Corona crisis. And there again, we have the chance that it's a socialist European Commissioner, Frans Timmermans, who is not just the brain and the soul, but also the face of this Green Deal, which has only become more pertinent with the Corona crisis than it was before the Corona crisis. We all know that we need to transform our economies and societies and make them carbon-free, to make sure that they protect and promote biodiversity, and we need a strong action, which also there again implies money, but also implies courage to tell to the companies and to the multinationals that they will to change their behavior very deeply, and that we socialists will be there to remind them.
Let me just come in and a very quick, and thank you for your passion. Let me just very quick, because obviously you are very clear there. You know, there's the European Green Deal. Bam, we have this pandemic. There are lots of people who are saying, oof, I'm not really sure. Yes, I can see that we mustn't waste the opportunities that the pandemic has brought from an environmental perspective. But there are others who just want to keep the two apart, the economic and the environmental, and say, well, let's leave it for later. So in a nutshell, I mean, how optimistic are you that those kind of environmental aspects can also stay at the forefront?
But everybody has to understand that the best long-term answer to pandemics is the one that we are confronted with, is the Green Deal. I mean, of course, in the short term, we need urgent measures in terms of health, in terms of support for the economy, for the social dimensions, and to support the unemployed and those who will suffer in Europe today. But if we want to prevent new pandemics in the future, we need to protect biodiversity. We need to make sure that we will have in a much more healthy environment, a much more healthy society. And there is no contradiction. On the contrary, I mean, health on the one hand, biodiversity, and a much more green model of society are what we need. And it is by working in this direction, by supporting also the transformation of our economy, that we will address the economic and social challenges that we are confronted with.
Okay, thank you for your clarity. I will come back to you. So I only lose you momentarily because I'm going to come now to the Secretary General of ETUC. I'm going to come to Luca Vicentini, because we're looking at obviously coming back. I mean, we heard there, I spoke with the Commissioner about job losses. Okay, this is what we hear about every day in the news, alongside, you know, all of the other stresses that are coming with this pandemic. So, you know, just if we look again a little bit at the history, this is where my question comes from, Luca. We had the financial crisis, well, you know this, had the EU, the member states, got restrictive economic austerity policies that came, and they had long-lasting negative consequences. And this pandemic is, to all intents and purposes, going to have much bigger consequences. So how can we ensure this time round that we've really got solidarity right at the heart of this, and that we relaunch the European social model in a way that really does prioritise everybody and is fair and just, and a little coda to that, and ensures thereby the survival of the EU, because it brings people with? Tell us your thoughts, please.
Thank you, Katrina, and good afternoon to everybody. It's a really a pleasure to be here with you to discuss about these very important topics on the eve of the Europe's Day. Well, you know, we all remember what happened after the financial crisis and what were the effects of this, because the mantra was that we needed to save the bank and to save our currency. And then what followed was austerity and cuts, particularly on jobs, on wages, and on social protection systems. And I will say, a bit cynically, that the citizens and workers were only side effects of these kind of measures. There was no solidarity at all in place, but even a total lack, I would say, of humanity. This crisis is different because it really addresses our feeling of humanity, and there is, I would say, a different awareness to some, in some respect, regarding the heroes and the victims of this crisis. That are workers. The workers that are in the forefront in healthcare, but also in other essential services, drivers, people that deliver food to old elderly people confined in their homes, and so on and so forth. So there is this awareness, and we are also facing an incredible situation in terms of job losses, because already now, after 2 months, we have already more than 40 million people that have lost their jobs, either permanently or temporarily, because they are suspended from their jobs. So the point is, okay, solidarity. But as Iratxe rightly said, the solidarity cannot be an empty word. It has to be based on concrete action, concrete help, concrete protection for these people. And I see 3 things that have to be done. The first one is to guarantee the health of workers, because workers are those that have continued working to ensure our safety, our food, our services. So those that have continued working have to be protected, but also those that will start working back, that will be back to work, must be protected. So the health and safety of workers at the workplace will be one of the essential elements that have to be addressed in the oncoming days, not even months, days. Second element, what to do for these 40 million people that are in unemployment. And it's true that member states have put in place important measures to support workers. It's also true that the European Union has deployed some important initiatives. Minister Scholz referred to SURE, this mechanism to help the employees in the labor market. But the problem is that, first, not all workers are covered by these measures. Precarious workers, non-standard workers, freelancers, self-employed, seasonal workers, migrants, undeclared workers, all these people are absolutely outside the possibility to be covered by these measures. And second, even more worrying, is the fact that all these measures that have been announced by the Eurogroup and then the Council, etc., 540 billion euros, Olaf Scholz say, right? But all this money is not there. There is no money at all going to the member states, going to companies, and going to workers at the moment. Everything is still stuck in the bureaucracy of the European Council, among the divisions of member states that were not yet able to put in place any concrete measure. Okay. So there is really urgency to put in place concrete things, concrete action, and of course, then also to start already designing this recovery plan. It was already being said that it has to be based on solidarity, has to be based on social elements, has to be based on grants and on fresh money. Really a lot of money, as Paul Magnet said, that is really essential to face this crisis properly. So I would say there is a different awareness in comparison to the financial crisis, but we will still see facts coming.
Thank you. And thank you for raising that, because I've been informed that there's a very lively debate going on. I'm just having a read here. Topics ranging from the economic response to democracy and how to rebuild solidarity. So given what you've just said, look, there's gaps in the EU protection. Where's the money? Is it getting to the member states? There's a lot of bureaucracy getting in the way. So perhaps some other members of the panel might come back on that when I come to a little bit of chat before I pose further questions. So thank you again. I say the same to you, Luca. I could sit with you over dinner for 4 hours and just chat with you, but time does not allow it. So thank you. I will come back to you. And I am going to move now on to the Secretary General of the Young European Socialists. She is Anna Pirtskalawa. Hello there. How are you? I'm going to sort of continue this theme, and we heard there about the need for protection, health protection, protection financially. There are people, you know, incredible statistics we heard. And of course, we've got young people, 3 out of 4, I believe, of whom are working in the informal economy. So agriculture, cafes, yeah, I've got the right stats there, restaurants. So they're poorly paid, it's unconventional, irregular hours, they have poor job security, and no social protection. So you get to wave a magic wand, Anna. What 3 measures, in a nutshell, do you think can create a more secure environment for young people who at this time are particularly vulnerable?
First of all, good evening, everyone, and Katrina, thanks a lot for also including the perspective of young people in the discussion, not only on European level, but also globally, because as it was mentioned by previous speakers, it's a global crisis we are facing at the moment. We are all mentioning that the emergency, the situation we are facing, it affects everyone. But we also need to remember that it does not affect everyone the same level. Yeah, to young people, it affects more. As you mentioned, the statistic is really, really alarming. A lot of young people are working in precarious work conditions without social security, without decent salaries. So it is important that we put a special focus on the young people and pay attention to the young people and their role and damage that it might cause to the young people. Because in the past 12 years, we, in our early 20s, in our late 20s, we already faced the second crisis. And those are the times when we should be taking our first steps toward the career developments. But at the same time, if we don't want the generation to be lost, we need the special measures. And now about measures, you asked me about very concrete steps, 3 steps that can be taken toward improving the state of young people. First of all, the social protection needs to be extended to everyone, especially on the people who are working on precarious working conditions. So those European plan for social protection needs to focus and cover on those target groups. The second can be, we have to pay a special attention to young seasonal workers because they are in agriculture, in tourism, and we all see that those are the issues, those are the fields that are very damaged at the moment. Also, active support of employment, because we have youth guarantees that also needs to be extended in a larger scope in order to cover more broader audience of young people, especially vulnerable groups like migrants. We also need to offer young people the quality job offers and quality trainerships at the same time. And lastly, I would like to focus that it needs to be the special attention given to the young entrepreneurs because they are hit very hard at the moment. They are in a quite depressed situation due to the existing lockdowns happening all over the world and also in Europe. Therefore, those can be the 3 main measures that we have to be taking.
Thank you. And let me ask you, I mean, I'm an old entrepreneur, actually, and I can tell you I empathize, but I'm more seasoned. So I can take, and I was speaking to my 25-year-old niece and my 21-year-old nephew the other day, and what she was saying to me, and I'm just adding a little layer here for a short response, is aside from everything you've said, the social protection, the financial precariousness, all of that, there's also that sort of psychological sense that we had it with the financial crisis. What the hell has happened to my path in my 20s? And you know, where do you feel that with you and colleagues and friends? Is there that sense with this crisis? Very briefly.
Of course, the mental health is one of the key factors that can be attacked, especially with young people, because when we don't know what the future is holding for us and when we don't have any securities around us, of course, it's going to affect very hardly the emotional and mental state of the young people, of the students, everyone.
Yeah, so it was very important to put that out there, and I know a Belgian university has done a very good study on what the psychological fallout will be after the pandemic, but that's a whole other discussion. I will have you back. Thank you so very much for now. As you see, I'm a little bit Hurricane Katrina, so see you shortly. I'm going to move directly on to Lisa Völker. So hopefully you will, hello. Hi. So again, going to ask you an opening question. So First of all, just in a nutshell for our audience, what does your organization Berliner Tafel do? Literally just 3 or 4 sentences so we can get a feel, because it's important in the context of the next bit of my question is why do we need that? You know, supposedly European social systems are so strong, but we need your organization. And how's Corona affected it, both in terms of financing, but support more on the volunteering side too? Would you expect anything from the EU to provide solidarity in that context?
Yeah, so thank you for having me first. I feel very intimidated by everyone else being here, to be honest. So the Berliner Tafel is a food bank. And in non-Corona times, we're able to support 125,000 people in Berlin with additional food. And 50,000 of those would usually come to food distribution points. Why do we need organizations like Berliner Tafel? I think every country needs that, no matter how rich they are or no matter how good their social protections are. Because being poor or being at the risk of poverty depends very much on social factors, such as health, unemployment, education, or even the upbringing. So children who grow up in a poorer household are more at risk of staying poor. And I think during the Corona times, this has actually deepened. So the inequalities are even more. So imagine being a child that has to prepare for their leaving cert at home, living in a 2-bedroom flat, sharing with 4 other people, in comparison to classmates who have their own house and their own room. And if I look at my own area of work, which is food security, and I look back at like 2 months ago when people were stockpiling madly and buying all the toilet paper, the people who already couldn't afford food on any normal day were looking at empty shelves. Yeah. So I think organizations such as ours are the ones buffering the worst of the Corona crisis. So what we were able to do, and since we're talking about solidarity, 1,800 people actually reached out in the last 6 weeks offering their help, because we had to close 42 out of our 45 food distribution points because our volunteers were elderly and at a group of risk. And usually our food distribution would be happening for like 200 people within a time frame of 2 hours. So that would be way too much. So since then, we've established a food delivery service. So we bring bags of food to the households of the people. So 300 volunteers each week come in person to our headquarters to help us running this. And we were able to deliver 16,000 bags of food so far. When it comes to promoting solidarity of the EU, I think the answer is always going to be yes. The EU can promote solidarity. Everyone can promote solidarity. Solidarity isn't rocket science. And I think the EU could be a fantastic platform to do so. If they could provide the platform for knowledge transfer, specific knowledge transfer, like let's get all the food banks together. What do you do? What do we do? What we can take away from each other? And then also obviously trading goods and services, like let's try to balance everything out. Who has too much of what, or who can offer something to someone else? And then I think also we need to like look forward to a common goal. I think everyone focused on themselves for a bit, and I think that was okay because we needed to get through the initial moment and start of the crisis. But now we need to look ahead, and now I think we might know what may lay ahead, and I think we need to look at all of that together.
Thank you. Thank you. You are way up there with every other speaker, so quite why you were nervous, I'm not sure. But I think it's very, very critical because I just want to bring it back. It's solidarity. I said at the outset, it's a very big word. So we've talked about lots of things thus far in this debate, and I'm just bringing it back to solidarity because you also put your finger on what you think it means. It also means knowledge transfer. That's where the EU can be very, very strong. Common goal, you said, fair enough. You echoed Iratxe. At the beginning, people were, woo, a little bit headless chicken. Now we need the common goal. But this trading of goods and services, who's strong there? Who's not strong there? How can I help? Where can we rebalance? You called it transfer.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for that. Very, very interesting. And interesting too that you still have, I have seen that action here in Belgium and in the UK where my family is, volunteers still coming to the fore.
So many. It's amazing. It's not only us, it's other organizations in Berlin as well. It's great because those are the people we need at the moment. It's young people who are like in university otherwise or unemployment. They just want to use their time. And that's so important right now.
And not to feel helpless as well.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I will see you shortly. I'm going to crack on because I keep my eye on the clock. I know we can go a little bit over 8 o'clock, but I'm keeping my eye. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're all good. My lovely audience, wherever you are in Europe, who are tuning in. I come to the last of the speakers of this first panel, and that is Brando Benefai. So hopefully our MEP hello from the Italian delegation. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good. I'm going to ask you probably a very simple and obvious question right at the end. I mean, this is it. We know Italy is one of the hardest hit countries. You were right there at the outset. Everybody else was watching, not necessarily learning always. So which are the most urgent tools that you think need to be adopted at European level in order to avoid a really deep social and economic crisis that everybody says is coming? What we see it coming. What? Be very concrete, please.
Yeah. First of all, we need to continue our work that we started in this already in these first months of the mandate to make some social instruments reality. They are still very important now that we are facing this situation. One of them is especially important, is the child guarantee, an instrument to support the lifting out of poverty of those, unfortunately, many tens and hundreds of thousands in Europe of children that are living in a condition of poverty, of educational poverty, of nutritional poverty, of housing poverty, of access to schooling and health services. It's still very important. It will be even more important after this crisis. But while we will leave this situation that will have scaring effects on economy, on social issues, obviously also on some generations. So obviously the older generation was the one most hit from the health perspective, but for sure the younger generation is the one that has lived in an economic crisis 7-8 years ago, in a moment very important for their life. Maybe they were studying, they were starting to work, and now they are again in this same situation. So for the younger generations, is especially challenging. They will need special support. So that's why we want to strengthen youth policies like the youth guarantee, that is also another instrument already existing that we want to expand to support the employment of young people. And finally, I want to make a more general point on solidarity, coming also from what we heard from the other speakers. We are not talking about a kind of unidirectional solidarity. We are talking about giving Europe the instruments. They discussed it earlier, the other colleagues, on the recovery fund, for example, to have solidarity with its future. We are talking about Europe Day. We have talked about the ambition of the founding fathers and mothers of building a European common future. We are not talking about just giving solidarity to those who were most hit. Yes, we also have that. But we also have the need to build a common instrument, a common framework, so that all of the European Union is able to advance. If we can only stand together. If we fall, we will fall together. And this is more and more understood, and that's why I have to say I want to be moderately optimistic. In these days, we see things moving, and we need to push them moving more and more, like we are doing as Socialists and Democrats group.
Okay, thank you. And again, I've had a message here to say that really is what the conversation is, that solidarity really has to mean something, that we're standing as one, but also in every European country. And thank you also, because you sort of did my job there, for reinforcing that it's not just about the most vulnerable, it's everything. We're not just talking crisis in terms of the context, we're talking a new beginning in general on the eve of this celebration. A quick question, because
the Green Deal, for example, it should continue.
One quick question, please, for a very short answer. We heard Luca, so we heard about financial instruments using, we've heard the calls, we've talked about grants, we've got bonds, impacts, funds. It must be quite confusing for some citizens if they're following it. And then we heard there, but there's some gaps in the protection, and there's a lot of bureaucracy at the level of the council. Anything you want to add there, Because this is where Europe stands and falls, isn't it? Is it able to walk?
No, I think it sounds very true what Luke has said, because it's true that the parliament has pushed a lot to make it quicker for the council to decide, because again, as we are celebrating the integration of Europe, it's clear that the way we decide now, it's not completely fine-tuned with the quickness that we need and the reaction that we need to put in place. So it's very important that we build together, we discuss like we are doing now, also of the future. In the next month, we need to think of a new Europe, to refound it, because it's clear that the European Union, as it is now, was not ready for something like this that happened. It's now trying to catch up, and it's doing much better than a few years ago. I think it was already said. It's doing better, but we need to do much better if we want all citizens to feel European Union and the European institutions to care about them, to be close to them, and to save their future.
Okay, thank you very much. So what I'm going to do now is uncheck, because I'm very conscious that it's so great to talk to you all, and I do very much want to honour what we said we would do. So I'm looking again at a lovely audience here, which is to pose some questions to the speakers that you sent in. I'm just going to ask, if you see my eyes slide, I'm going to ask Uta if that's all good. I can crack on with that. I'm just very conscious of timing, so that way I can read the messages that are coming in from the tech team in the Parliament who are not with me. So perhaps if we can see some of the speakers back on screen together, perhaps 6 of us, that would be really helpful. Here we are, we're all appearing. I wish I could ask you all, I can't ask you all to a response to what you heard from colleagues, but is there anything, not to repeat anything we've heard, anything we didn't hear, on this question of solidarity, whether it's fiscal solidarity, whether it's between member states, whether it's within member states, within different social groups, anything that we feel hasn't been said before I start to pose these Facebook questions? Literally a 2-liner, anything that you thought, oh, Kat, we haven't even said this, or you're all perfectly happy and you can give me the thumbs up with the way things are going.
Right.
Thumbs up from you? Yeah? Okay. Am I good, therefore, because this is all a test for us for the first time? Can I ask you some of these questions? These are really the ones that have come in from the progressives around Europe. So stay on screen with me. I think it's fine. I will let Pierre do his job technically. I'm going to start with you, Iratxe, because I have a question from Alex for a really nice, shorter response than the first time for all of you, ladies and gentlemen, please. What's the plan for Europe? If the plan should be higher integration, then how can this be achieved? And where is solidarity going to fit into that higher integration? A moment or two from you, please, Iratxe, if I might have your thoughts.
I will try to be quickly, and first of all, I want to thank Alex for your question. What is our plan? I have to tell you that we were working during the last weeks in our plan as a political family, as a political group in the European Parliament. And this plan has to be based in the solidarity, equality, and a guarantee that we will be near to the people who have more needs. Of course, we have to think to keep our priorities. The new Green Deal has to be our important instrument to guarantee our future in Europe and in the world. But we need to understand that other issues are very important. The social dimension. I'm insisting a lot because, as Brandon tell, for example, the child guarantee, the unemployment youth guarantee, and issues like, for example, the gender equality. It's other very, very important issue for us as a political family, because this crisis will attack the more vulnerable people. And for example, we were working about this gender plan to guarantee that Europe can be supporting the citizens who will have more needs, no? And in any case, Alex, if you want to have more information, you can access to our web page, the S&D web page, and we have our plan, including all measures that are in our discussion. And of course, during the next weeks, we will push, because the European Commission have to present this recovery plan, and needs to be based in our values. And if the people have more ideas and more suggestions, we will be open to listen them and to work with citizens.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you for reinforcing that. I'm going to move, so I'm going to move directly on, ladies and gentlemen, and pose a next question that's come in from Facebook, and I'm going to pose that to Nicolas. So there you are still with me. Thank you for your patience. So your question comes from Jasper. You're answering Jasper here. And the question is the following. Fiscal reform of the EU and Eurozone would allow a true institutionalization of European solidarity. How far should it go? And should the EU become a transfer union in the truest sense, with that wealth being redistributed? A cool 1 minute answer from you would be so appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, I try to be very, first, certainly we have to reform the monetary union. There are ideas coming up, and this crisis, if we want to avoid a euro crisis, it's very urgent to deepen, to strengthen the monetary union. The monetary union was not built, unfortunately, for big crises. We have experienced it during the financial crisis, and we see it now. So there has to be a stronger European monetary union with treasury, with a budget. We have now a very small beginning. This is absolutely indispensable. Second point, I do not like this transfer union concept, because this is always a calculation who pays in and who gets something out. Now, we have not a transfer union, we need a solidarity union, because I do not calculate what are the surpluses of these countries exporting to these other countries. So this is the notion of a solidarity union, and we have to get the institutions to manage this solidarity on a fair basis, on common standards, on common values. And I think what we need in our societies, and that's what the crisis has shown us, we need more solidarity, we need more social infrastructures, and therefore we need a strong social dimension in the European Union. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the wave. Thank you for the very interesting point of view there. To be very clear, no, to me, transfer, that strikes too much of who does what, in, out, payment. I actually think that it's much more, it's a solidarity union. Just bear with me because I'm reading a message. Okay, there is a message. I will keep it for later. I've had a message come in. So I'll post those. Thank you very much. Thank you, audience, for those who've sent in. I will get to those. I'm being very speedy now. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to have to answer as though you're trapped in a lift with whoever is your most disliked person in the world, okay? Elevator pitch responses. Paul, for you, please, sir. The EU institutions, here is a question from Michael. The EU institutions are dominated by the Council, and so that remains guided by its juxtaposition with its national self-interest, where leaders are much more accountable nationally. So Michael doesn't think that the federal solution is realistic. And how about some open debates? Europe organises open debates between EU national leaders to generate citizen interest and to reinforce them to be, well, partly accountable to the whole of the EU. What do you think of that idea?
Well, yes, we certainly need more transnational debates. When I listen sometimes to the declarations of colleagues and sometimes even friends from other member states, take, for example, the declarations of the Dutch Prime Minister a few weeks ago and the Dutch Finance Minister, I feel really sorry. I feel really sorry because when I see those people who are so reluctant and who just don't want to build more solidarity in Europe. Of course, I can understand that it's difficult in their member state, that they have their own public opinion. But I think the only way to go beyond that is to think European. If you only think of your own national public opinion and all those who are against and all those who are reluctant, you will never be able to have the courage to say, as Mrs. Merkel said in the migration crisis, wir schaffen das. Yes, we can do it. And if you want to do it, we have to have the courage to enter into a global transnational discussion. And to come back to the first question, the best place to do so is the European Parliament. I mean, let's have less European Council and Council of Ministers and more European Parliament. And then we will have more transnational discussion and I'm sure more solidarity.
Okay, thank you very much. Luca, I'm coming to you. The question has been posed to you from David. And David says, neoliberalism, look at me, I sound drunk and I'm literally only drinking water, I can assure you, even though it looks like a whiskey glass. Neoliberalism has triumphed at national level in much of the EU because of the balance of power between globalized markets and not yet globalized democracy. It's uneven, that balance of power. So the EU could partially restore this balance and revive the ideals of the left, such as solidarity, the focus of this discussion, and fairness. So how can we prevent the neoliberalization, the nationalism of European politics and revive these ideas in European minds? The clock starts now for you.
Yeah, I think that David is absolutely right that neoliberalism and austerity policies have completely jeopardized the European dream. They have destroyed our economy, our civil society, our labor markets, and our capacity to be resilient. And we have shown this, we have seen this. It happened exactly because of COVID now. Our healthcare systems were not able to cope. Our labor markets have been completely destroyed. And so now we are facing a situation of incredible crisis and distrust also among people. Neoliberalism and austerity have created populism and anti-European sentiments, so also undermining our democracy in Europe. So the fundamental element here is not to come back to business as usual. We feel two temptations, let's say, two bad temptations flying around. One comes from politicians. There are many politicians, as Paul Magnet just said, that are telling us, okay, for the moment we understand we have a crisis, so we need some extraordinary measures, but then come on, let's come back to fiscal rules, to no more hazard. I mean, let's try to be absolutely in line with the rules. And this is one temptation that is very dangerous, but there is also another temptation that is very dangerous that very often comes from some employers that say, okay, now we need a lot of money for the emergency public investment, but then we need to come back to the essential. Let's drop the ambition that the European Commission set at the beginning of the mandate with the Green Deal, with the European Pillar of Social Rights, with a lot of important initiatives to make our social model and our economic model more sustainable and more based on solidarity. Well, I think we need to defeat these two bad temptations. We have to make sure that the recovery plan and all the strategies that we follow for the future are really based on solidarity, sustainability, and social justice. Without these three concepts becoming reality, there is no hope for the European dream. So it's really our responsibility to make a change, a great change, now and for the future, I think.
And you are as ambitious and focused on the importance of retaining the European Green Deal, as Paul spoke of before, as you know, as keeping that absolutely front and center.
As Paul said, that the only possibility to build a resilient and sustainable economic model is to make it really sustainable, and sustainable means green and social. There is no doubt about it.
Thank you. Forgive me, ladies and gentlemen, if I'm speeding up. Ladies and gentlemen at home, I have 3 more questions, and I have one that's come in sort of at the very, very last minute. So let me turn, please, to Anna again. And here's a question for Anna. Do we see Anna? I'm just waiting to see Anna, or Anna will float eventually on screen to join us. There we go. Hopefully she's here. Okay, so the EU seems to be the last great power to push for genuine multilateralism. This comes from Benjamin. Okay, now the WTO and the WHO, greatly needed, but certainly strongly undermined, particularly at present. Shouldn't we create a democratic political institution of democratic nations that believe in that multilateralism, pushing for international cooperation and common global regulation? Couldn't that place Europe and the EU really front and center to be much more present to push ahead a very much needed, bad question, new world order? Does that make sense to you? Have I adequately addressed that question from Benjamin for your concise answer?
Indeed, I think thanks for the question to Benjamin. Indeed, as he mentions, this is a global crisis that requires global answers. But I think the institution he is mentioning in the question, it already exists, and it's called UN. Therefore, I would not say that solution is to create alternative of the United Nations. It rather should be maybe reforming something like, for example, he's mentioning Security Council and how it works, favoring only a few powerful players. But at the same time, existing of such kind of organization doesn't mean that EU should step back when it comes to global responses and global answers to the crisis. Instead, I would say it needs to be in the center or even in the front lines of offering those kind of multinational solutions on the global agenda. Therefore, it's very important that we have this global anti-crisis agenda also on the EU level as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to now turn to Lisa and then finally to Brando again. Lisa, the question for you, hello there, has come from Kevin, and we're going to borders here. So we heard in the video, we heard about what notions of solidarity. You talked about knowledge transfer. We've talked about how member states have helped each other. At the outset, it was a bit headless chicken. They are helping each other with equipment, who's bringing whom to hospitals. There is a greater sense of practical solidarity. But here's a question from Kevin. Would harder borders in the EU appease some member states and perhaps lead to a more cooperative EU? Your thoughts in a tiny nutshell.
Yeah, my thoughts in a nutshell. I can't even imagine living in EU with harder borders, to be honest. I don't think most of us do. I can't even remember. I was born in 1990. I can't even remember borders in Germany. Would hard borders appease maybe politicians and governments? Maybe, if I'm being honest. I'm not deep enough into those topics to be the judge of that. Would it appease the European people living in the member states? I don't think so. Absolutely not. I know sometimes it feels, especially working in a multilateral setting, it feels as if we have more differences than similarities. But for us commoners on the ground, the European idea is very much thriving and alive. And maybe we've taken it for granted for too long. But at the same time, most of us love being Europeans and everything that comes along with that.
Okay, thank you very much for that, and for the emotion that and your categoric no. That might with politicians some, but certainly not when you call them commoners. That's very interesting. I'm now going to come last but not least to Brando, and then I have one more question that's come in that one person only can answer. But Brando, your question comes from Michal, and it's also looking at a lack of belief. We talked about a question there about harder borders. So he says, we've heard recently of a lack of belief in an ever closer union and a strong opposition to Eurozone reform among some political representatives in EU countries. Does that sort of lack of ambition prevent the EU evolving? And does a two-speed Europe therefore become inevitable in this context? For a lovely short response, please.
Yeah. A multi-speed Europe is already there. Some countries have the euro currency, some others don't. Some countries adhere to Schengen, others don't. So it's a fantasy to discuss about this multi-speed Europe. It's already there. We need to make it work and to make it governed. So yes, I think we need more ambition. We need the European Parliament to take the lead. In fact, tomorrow we should have started a conference on the future of Europe to reform the EU institutions. I'm a convicted federalist. I'm a convinced European federalist. That's my personal position. But anyway, federal or not, we need to build a stronger European Union that is able to deliver. And I think the European Parliament should play the constitutional role, like a constitutive role to relaunch this ambition. We should not let the governments leave the citizens without the European Union they deserve.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I think this debate as a whole is just, again, looking at that from the constitutional elements and from how the institutions work together. In particular, we heard about the council. We had a question there. You know, is it leading to a little bit too much power, too much bureaucracy? So obviously that's the tip of an iceberg of a discussion, and of course the role of the European Parliament. And we're going to have to not further explore it here. I'm going to leave whoever hands up first. It's a very generic question. I'm just going to close this debate in just a moment, but a lovely lady called Monica says that I think you will all agree that we must ensure that inequalities do not increase even more. That's the big challenge ahead. And there's a question from Magno one answer. I don't care whoever puts their hand up quickest, because you could all have a view. What path for the European public health system? Anyone want to say their two pennies? You, Luca. So you can have that closing word. Then I will ask Iratxe for 3 bullet points, and we will close. Luca. So.
Just on inequality, but it's linked also to the other question. Without a comprehensive and universal healthcare system, universal public services, and also job creation for everybody, increasing wages and making sure that nobody is left behind by our social protection systems, well, we cannot survive in the future. So these are the answers to have less inequalities and better working public health systems and public services for the future. I think the two questions go really together in this respect, I think.
Yeah. Are we all happy with that? Can I ask the last question, ladies and gentlemen, to Iratxe? Can I just hear from you if there's any sort of summary, anything that you want to, some takeaways before I close the panel? Oh, hang on. I can't hear you.
Sorry.
Right.
Very quickly, I think that everybody can be agreed with the idea that the European values and the Social Democrats' values are more important than ever. Solidarity, equality, social justice, and we need to be responsible, and we need to think that this exceptional moment can be an opportunity. We need to be united. We need to be stronger, and we will work thinking in the people who need for us, for the politics, because in this important moment we need a strong policy, and the Social Democrats will do it. You can be sure.
Thank you very much. Thank you. May I thank all of you on screen here. I know not all of you are on screen. I don't know whether we can just see those who aren't, but thank you so very much for your time. I know it's very frustrating for you all because you're huge brains with huge experience and you can say so much. So I'm very grateful that you were so concise. And I thank everybody who sent in questions. Again, I remind you, if a question doesn't get answered, you are welcome to filter them through the S&D website after this event. That's no problem. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to build on this discussion. So I need to ask all of you to kindly disconnect so that we can enable on the platform our next set of speakers to come. So if you are all able to do that. Thank you so very much. I hope we meet again and share a drink across a table, not at 2 meters distance, in the not too distant future. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us. I do hope you are staying with us. I think there was a lot to think about there in terms of solidarity, not just in terms of what are the financial aspects of it, but it's very important to understand that we're not just talking about the crisis, we're talking about how to build a new Europe point final, to bring everybody along. And so we're talking about financial aspects, the personal aspects, between member states, in member states. It's a huge discussion when we are all together around a big round table, but I hope that it has given you some food for thought, not least some of the instruments that can be used by the EU in the process of this fair and equitable recovery. So we are going to build on that now. We're going to move to, again, exchange some ideas on the fight for strong democracies in Europe. I'm going to ask my speakers to be as cogent as they possibly can be so I can ensure all our lovely audience stays with us till the end of this event. We're going to focus on here how to improve the EU's institutional infrastructure and strengthen the rule of law. That's going to be very important. We've certainly seen some steps in some member states that have been taken that are incompatible with European values. So we're also going to put that issue under the spotlight. We do have some great speakers, so perhaps we can just see the names of those on screen before I start posing questions. So possibly, I don't know if we're able to, voila, thank you so very much. So just that people can follow with me, we have the PES President Sergei Stanishev. We have Gabriel Bischoff, who is Vice Chair of the AFCO Committee. To improve the EU's institutional infrastructure. Oh, that was, we have Christophe Clergeau. We've certainly, think there's a bit of a delay from the PES group in the Committee of the Regions in France. We have Alicia Ginel, President of the Young European Socialists. Hello. We have Klára Dobrev, Vice President of the European Parliament, obviously member of the S&D group. Hello. We have Dominic Ruiz de Vesa, who's coordinator of the AFCO committee. And we have Domagoj Hajdukovic. Hello, thank you for the wave, Deputy Chairman of the European Affairs Committee in the Croatian Parliament. This panel starts off slightly differently because the first question, which I will pose, is going to be posed to somebody who's going to answer by video. So the first question I'm going to pose to Sergei Stanishev is the following. So for the benefit of the audience, I'll let you know what that question is, and then we'll hear from him. In this joint fight for more solidarity and democracy in Europe, in the Spitzenkandidat process and in improving the decision-making process so that citizens sit at the heart of shaping European policies, what specific actions must the progressives take? So sit back and relax for a moment because we are going to get an answer via video message.
Hello, everybody. Happy Europe Day to all of you. It's a great occasion to celebrate the achievements of the European Union, but also and mostly to look towards the future, because we socialists are always future-oriented. We are living in very difficult times of crisis, which was triggered by the coronavirus. And of course, the dimensions are far beyond the health emergency which we go through. This crisis triggered a very serious, deep social consequences and economic consequences. We can feel it all over Europe. That means response on behalf of our family, which is timely, fast, which is also on a large scale. And this is what we are working for, to have a strong European recovery plan, which is massive, which has to save our economies and societies from the unemployment, insecurity about jobs, and many other challenges which we are facing today. But of course, there is another element which is vital for us socialists. This is protecting democracy, because Europe is not just a common market. Europe is a community of values, and democracy, human rights are in the core of these values. We have always fought for them, and we have to be very watchful these days that the emergency situation is not used by anti-democratic forces against the rights of every European citizen. We're already seeing that in Hungary, in Poland, the governments are abusing the situation for their political benefits, trying to rule, as in Hungary Orban is doing, through decrees, conducting elections for presidents without fair competition and in a very suspicious way, and we react strongly to defend and protect democracy. But also, we should not let, after the hot phases of this crisis, some measures which were probably necessary in some member states to be used against the privacy interests of the citizens, against their rights. This is why the protection of democracy, of the rights of every citizen, are in the core of our recovery plan. And we shall be very vigilant against anybody who is trying to violate them. Democracy is really a state of mind, but also a state of society. And only through it we can provide a recovery which is fair, which is accountable to the citizen, a recovery which is bringing us towards a more sustainable, green, and socially just future. All the best to you on this day, and our fight will go on, and we shall be successful if we are united as a family. Good luck to you.
So that's a nice opening video to set the scene. There was some, if anybody's tweeting, there were some interesting quotes there. Certainly democracy is a state of mind. That's a very good entrance exam question to university, I think. And the focus there on rights. You know, this is not the time for anti-democratic forces to use this crisis in the wrong way. So I'm sure we definitely will talk more about that in this second panel. The ladies and gentlemen who will come to join me, I am going to have to really ask you to be delightfully concise so that we can ensure our audience stays with us until the end. So I'm going to turn first to the Vice Chair of the AFCO committee. So if Gabriele Bischoff could join me on screen, that would be wonderful. Hello, good evening to you. Thank you for your patience. I hope your microphone is unmuted now, because I need to hear you. So my question is the following. A conference, we heard about this, on the future of Europe is foreseen. And the S&D group has been demanding for some time better inclusion of EU citizens. So that's very much the focus. What do you think? You could let us know your thoughts on some of the innovative forms of participation, the inclusive forms of participation, so that we can better engage citizens in that conference.
Yes, I mean, in the first panel, we heard very much that we need to be brave if we want to come out of this multiple crises. And this is why we are convinced that this conference on the future of Europe is a great opportunity to reconnect again back with the citizens. And for this, we need new innovative forms, because for us as progressives, the European project was always not a project of the elites, it was a project of the people. And therefore, if we create a conference on the future of Europe, we want to have also the citizens as a key part in it. And the parliament made a very innovative proposal here. It said, we are going to organize this conference, and on one hand, we will have an institutional panel with politicians from all countries, with experts, but on the same level, we want to have joint European marketplaces where citizens of all over Europe come together, they debate together, and they come up with proposals. And these proposals have to be taken into consideration and debated also by the institutional part of this conference. And for us, it's very important that it is very inclusive, that it mirrors the European society. So we want nurses, teachers, workers on company level. We want the delivery guy. We want this self-employed, the entrepreneur. We want their views, their experience, their expectations on Europe. And then in the end, we want to listen and come up with a set of proposals on the key question, and that is a new beginning for Europe. Because what we can see with business as usual, we will not come out of this crisis.
And what do you new ways? And in that process of this marketplace where people can come up with proposals, and again, I have to ask you for a brief answer, how do you think it can be different so that when people give their proposals, they know and they can see that what they're proposing has been taken forward at a political and a European level?
We want to build in feedback loops so that people also get a feedback, how were their proposals taken into consideration. And one point for us is very key, short, as Paul said it, we want European agoras, marketplaces, a European debate of citizens, not different national debates as it now, because it will give another spirit to this initiative.
Yeah, thank you for reinforcing. I think that's a critical point, and that it really is a mixed agora, and we're not just sticking in those national silos. And also to be clear what you mean about citizens, absolutely across the board. Okay, thank you very much. I will come to you later. I think you've seen the format of this, so you're familiar. I'm going to move on now and move to Christophe Clergeau, who is president of the Socialist, Ecologist, Radical and Republican group, Pays de la Loire, and he is also the PES group in the Committee of the Regions. So we're really talking about localizing things here, local decision makers, the importance of mayors who are, oh my goodness, hellishly under the spotlight, and the importance of regions. So I'm going to try and keep my question as short as I can, bear with me if there's a bit of background. Obviously, the group has pushed in the Committee of the Regions very hard for cohesion policies to be strengthened in the future MFF, so that convergence economically, ecologically, socially remains a real goal for Europe. But I think you may agree that the pandemic has shown that you can't neglect any areas, any peripheral areas, any rural areas, because their economic development and their digital development can also be a very, very strong asset to this sustainable development as a whole. What are some of the proposals so that this is more bottom up? We heard there from Gabrielle, the bottom up. So what are some of the proposals that the core group has at the moment for ensuring that the bottom up stuff goes hand in hand with the kind of EU's guiding role?
Thank you, Katrina. Good evening to everybody. Perhaps for side, the lack of solidarity is a blow for European democracy. We need more solidarity, but it's not about solidarity between states. It's a question of fraternity between people, between European people who want to build together a new common future. And we have to build that at the local level. In this crisis, local leaders are at the forefront. We try to save lives, to protect people, especially the weakest and the poorest. We try to preserve jobs, but also to fight to keep a new future possible. And we mobilize public tools, but we mobilize citizens and citizen creativity. And this is for us, there is for us no difference between a mayor, a trade unionist, an activist, and we all together try to build what we call new progressive local stories. And you will go find good examples of the stories on our website. And you give a word about cohesion. Cohesion is not for us just a question of defending cohesion policy. It's not a question of money for region. It's really a question of convergence, giving the same possibility to each local area to aim at the same level of quality of life and quality of human being of jobs. And we can bear such inequalities in Europe. We can stand the idea of asymmetric paths for our regions and countries. That's why we, the Committee of the Region, give a strong support to Pedro Sánchez recovery plan. But we do not need new debts at national level. We need new European action to support concrete projects at local level, and projects not only led by local authorities, but projects led by people and on the ground. And we are deeply convinced that the future of Europe depends on citizen and local pressure and contribution. There is no more future for a strictly intergovernmental Europe. Thanks to the Parliament, there is a strong voice in Brussels for people, but we have a second voice. And if we want to build a stronger Europe, we must be part of the policy making, perhaps not to decide, but to contribute to breakthroughs and to policy implementation and monitoring. And regions and cities are the cornerstone of democracy. There is no better place to experience vitality of democracy than in marketplace and the ground when people actually meet, live. So our regions are the labs where you can invent new solutions to tackle locally the global challenges and to implement social pillar and new Green Deal.
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much there, because it hasn't been something that's come up tremendously, this social pillar, which I know is very much at the heart of the progressive community. Again, something critical to be brought forward in the recovery. And just to say, I liked what you said, for you, because you were obviously listening to the first debate, solidarity is about fraternity between people. So that's absolutely critical. So that echoes what Sergei said at the outset. In a way, democracy is a state of mind. Very short answer, please, because I'm playing with time here. But it's what I was going to ask you is absolutely local stories, local action. It makes sense with people. It resonates. The Committee of the Regions. It's closer to the people. Do you think though that locally people can see what they do as having a value in a European context if they believe in that European added value? Do you think they can align the two? short answer, or is it too far away?
No, it's too far away. That's why we need a voice for people through local authorities in Brussels. But that's why we need a recovery plan to support concrete local projects. People have good ideas. They are mobilized to set up new action to face the crisis and to prepare future. And they need direct support, not only through the states. They need concrete local support with partnership with local authorities.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. I bid you farewell just momentarily because I'm going to ask Alicia Ginel to join me. She is an MEP and president of the Young European Socialists. So hello to you and good evening. Thank you also for your patience. I think a good question for you would be to ask directly, what are the key demands of European youth to achieve more Europe and to encourage young generations to identify, it's a very strong word, to identify with the European project so that they do take part in a democratic process. They do exercise their vote, they do work locally, they do build on this notion of solidarity. What would the demands be?
Well, so thanks, Katrina. And first of all, I would like to thank the S&D group for inviting Anna and me, representing the Young European Socialists, and especially to the team that has organized this wonderful event to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the Schuman Declaration. So I would like to start answering by a famous quote from Jean Monnet that says, "Continue, continue, there's no future for the people of Europe other than in union." And I think that that's what we have to fight, the young Europeans, and especially from Young European Socialists, and that's our wish for Europe. And the point is that we do not only want more Europe, but we also want a better Europe. So I think that young people should be very critical in order to improve the things that older generations have created. And actually, that is what every generation should aim for in order to improve our democracy over the years. So in terms of European Union, the good news is that we will do it from an Europeanist perspective, because more than 80% of young Europeans think that we have more reasons to stay united than reasons to be divided. So it is in the younger generations where the European Union has its best ally, and yet it's also us who are the more eager for changes. But let me highlight three main changes that I think that would work to build this more and better union for our generation. So the first one is the institutional system of the European Union that should be rationalized to make it more efficient and more recognizable by the citizens. Now there is confusion of powers between the EU and its member states, and national and European competencies should be separated more clearly. And at the European level, the Parliament's legislative role should be in an equal footing with the Council. As a second proposal, I would say that we also need more participation from citizens in the European politics. And I think that the figure of the Spitzenkandidat was a good system to increase the voting turnout in the last European elections, and that we should keep it. But we also call for a democratic constitutional process to redefine the role of European institutions and the meaning of the European democracy. And that's why we believe that the Conference on the Future of Europe should be as participatory as possible for people, and it should have the goal of establishing this democratic constitution for Europe. And there, young organizations and young people could be a good added value. And finally, I would say that the social pillar that we have talked about already should be fully developed and implemented in the future, because to establish things like the common unemployment scheme or the child guarantee, it would be a first good start. So if the EU is more involved in social aspects, then the role will be much more tangible for citizens, and then will make it more important. So I think that with these three main issues, it will help to make us there.
Thank you very much. I think you're right about that clarity between national and EU competence. You talked there about putting the Parliament on an equal footing with the Council, the huge importance of citizens. You brought up, but that hasn't come up yet, about you personally, the Spitzenkandidat. So that, yeah, we'll see how that evolves, because certainly off the back of the last elections, and the importance of engaging young people in the Future of Europe conference. Again, I could talk to you for hours. I won't at the moment. It will be for another time when we're not separated by a vast distance. And I will turn to Klára, if I may, to Klára Dobrev. And I will see you in a bit, Alicia. Thank you very much. We have the MEP Klára Dobrev, I believe, because we're going to come to a discussion about rule of law, but maybe she's not there. Perhaps I can come instead. Is Klára there? No, Klára's not there. So I don't have. Okay, so I have Dominic.
Hello.
Hello. So forgive me. I feel like I'm doing this and here looking at all sorts of things. So I'm going to come to you next, please. And I think you're going to put a bit of a focus more here on the EU's constitutional future. This is something that we do want to make sure that we touch upon in this discussion. Many European citizens are demanding a Europe which is not just a market, we've heard this, but it's also a social union. We're looking at the future of Europe. We're looking at the kinds of who we need to engage at a citizen level, at a youth level. How can this discussion address this issue of a social union?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I think this question and this debate, a new beginning for Europe, is very timely. You asked specifically about the social union, but I was hearing the previous panel, and I heard Paul Magnet, and he talked about reviewing the Stability and Growth Pact, right? This is also part of a more social Europe. Alicia just talked about making a real, let me use it in this way, the European pillar of social rights, which we know right now is a non-binding declaration, right? That the Council adopted in Gothenburg. It's good, but it's certainly is not, a binding instrument so far. And then we have, of course, the question of the Green Deal and the ecological transition. Well, those are three things: social, ecological union, let me put them together, that are not, they are not either present in our current treaty. Certainly, the ecological transition is not in the treaty, nor the objectives of climate neutrality, for example. The European Pillar of Social Rights is not in the treaty. And we do have in the treaty, what Paul Magnet referred, which are very, neoliberal and right now unworkable ideas. We cannot, for example, finance our governments or the European Union from our central banks, like Great Britain or the US are doing. And this is because of the Maastricht Treaty. So if we really want to unleash a new progressive era in Europe, we also need to start a constitutional reform of the European Union. And in a way, it's also long overdue. And I can finish with that, not to make it longer. The last time we started a reform process of our institutions, also not only regarding the content of the treaties, which I just referred, but also how we take decisions. Alicia also referred that we don't have as much power as the Council, and that poses a democratic problem. And also unanimity in the Council poses an efficiency problem, in addition to a democratic problem. But the last time we tried to change the treaties was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we started, with the Laken Declaration in 2001, the last debate on the future of Europe. We've produced a convention, the European Constitution, and in the end, the Lisbon Treaty. And it's been more than 10 years we've been with the Lisbon Treaty, and in these 10 years, the world has changed radically. Acceleration of climate change, digitalization, very harsh geopolitics, Brexit, Trump, migration flows. It's a totally different world. So this is the time, if we really want to make our progressive policies effective and credible, to also Social Democrats be the ones that lead a new phase of constitutional reform in Europe.
Thank you. And I think you've been very, very clear there. Thank you for that clarity. And I think in a way, what you're saying, to distill it, is it needs to be fit for purpose. There's a lot of changes. There's a lot of stuff there. Some of it's just not binding. There's other stuff that's just out of date. Time has passed. It's a brave new world. Now it's going to be another one, another new normal. We need to make it fit for purpose. So thank you very much for your clarity there. I'm now going to go back to Klára, if I may, if Klára Dobrev, S&D MEP, if you are there, because we are going to, forgive me, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a little bit of noise in the background. Where I am in my home, I'm going to keep it to the minimum. Klára, we heard it, I mentioned it, and we heard it in that opening video from Sergei Stanishev, and he was actually talking about Hungary and Poland. So I'm going to put the focus on there now and the rule of law, because, well, as you know, according to the words of a Hungarian MP, sorry, the Hungarian PM, the government has been building an illiberal democracy, and there's even been degrading declarations, particularly against women, to opposition MEPs. So here's a member state that's openly attacking European values. It's something that citizens, people pick up on instantly. Why isn't the EU doing more? Why is this happening? Do you think there are some particular concrete measures not yet deployed that could be to make the Hungarian government change its path?
Yes, definitely, and thank you very much for this invitation. Let me start by telling that we warned the European Union already 10 years ago that if we cannot stop Orbán's regime, it will spread like what a word to use nowadays, but that was the word we were using for 10 days. It will spread like a virus, the anti-democratic movements and governments in the European Union. And nobody listened to us. And now look at Poland, look at some other Eastern European countries, look at the populist movements in Western Europe. They all learn from Orbán. And unfortunately, until now, the European institutions and mainly the commissions, they are going to the legal, administrative, bureaucratic details. But the problem with the Orbán regime lies not in the details. It's the whole. He's building an exclusive power, and he's trying to tear apart checks and balances. And everybody knows it. Everybody sees it. The European institutions are seeing it. And still we are debating about legal details. I think that's what has to be changed. Because Orbán's European policy is very, very simple. Give me the money and leave me alone. That's all. But he understands under power there are two things, or in politics there are two things. First is power, second it's cash. And here lies the answer to your question, that what can the European Union and the institutions, what can they do? And let me make a basic statement. First of all, understand that autocratic regimes so far in the European Union were built from European Union taxpayers' money. In the last 10 years, they were financed by European Union taxpayers' money. And this money is used to undermine the European democracy and to weaken European Union. I mean, this is really ridiculous. So that's why I would have actually three suggestions. First of all, to institutions, mainly to the Commission, be political body, for God's sake. You are a political body. You are not simply an administrative body. You are the guardian of European values as well. So instead of administrative and very polite formulation and sentences, state it as it is, call the Orbán regime by his name and his actions by his name, and stop being so weak and so polite. I think that's number one. Number two, and this goes for all of us, I think we should make robust campaigns, and not against somebody or against something, but for something. We should make really campaigns for Europe, for European values, for rule of law, for the euro, for the Green Deal, for the just transition, you name it. Populists are spending a huge amount of money, partly actually financed by Russians as well. So I think it's time for us to fight back and fight back with the positive messages what we have actually about the European Union. And third is stop funding dictators and their oligarchs. Simply stop it, but do not stop supporting the people in Hungary or in Poland, which means that I would strictly propose, and I will fight for it, that no country should be eligible for European funds whose government is not member of the European Public Prosecution Office, because that's the strongest tool we have right now against corruption. And second, I would be very, very for to take away the right of the governments, of the corrupt governments, to distribute European money, but do not take away the money from the people. So be creative, be innovative, find a way how to finance Hungarian, Polish people directly, civil organizations, local governments, and finally, just show a red line which cannot be crossed in the European Union by a democratic government. So finally, stand up for the European citizens as well.
Thank you very much again for your immense clarity there, and what you are seem to be also proposing is a carrot and a stick approach. On the one hand, you're saying stop being weak, okay, so time to fight back, and then the other, we're saying also campaigns for Europe, because you need to echo what the populists are doing. So we need both approaches, and also what you're saying, don't stop funding the people. Think about how that money gets there. So thank you so very much. I will come back to you. I am being swift, as you know. These events always run on longer, and I'm trying to keep everybody engaged. So do stay with us, and I will come back to you. I'm just reading out, actually, a comment from the online audience that wants to underscore part of the conversation that we have already had, and that we heard from Christoph when he was talking about local stories, local labs. A recovery plan needs to really also prioritize local projects. And a comment from the online audience is that importance for local politics. We have to strengthen the link between the EU policies and the local policies. And this is very key for answering citizens' questions. So thank you very much for that. While you are there, I can't find it actually. So I'm just having a look, because there was another question that came in about the rule. A gentleman called Pedro. So hello, Pedro. Thank you very much. Just wanted to chip in that Europe really does need to be on high alert for the rise in extreme speech, extreme attitudes from some countries that are suppressing human rights and entering into discrimination towards citizens. So I hope, Pedro, that what you heard Klára say has made you feel encouraged in terms of her suggestions, her point of view of what should be done. I'd now like to come to our last speaker of this panel, if I may, who is the Deputy Chairman of the European Affairs Committee in the Croatian Parliament, and he is Domagoj Hajdukovic. Hello, sir. How lovely of you to join us. I'm going to come to you. There was a few questions, but let me just stick to one. And we're also looking at the institutional side, and of course, what the Croatian presidency's plans are for the long-term institutional setup. So we've heard about all of these relationships between national governments, between the EU, between the European Parliament and the Council, between how we need to safeguard and promote the rule of law, democracy, and European values. So let's now put the focus onto the parliaments, the national parliaments. We've had a lot at EU level. What do you think the role of national parliaments is in safeguarding all of those things, which, as we say, are European values? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, and hello everybody. Well, when discussing importance of national parliaments, a few quotes about the importance of parliaments through history do spring to mind, but I don't want to waste time with quotes. I would rather say that we can all agree that parliaments are actually lifeblood of democracy. Why? Because they are watchdogs of democracy, they are watchdogs of institutions. They oversee the government and scrutinize their work. According to different national laws, appoint different officials. For example, in Croatia, we appoint ombudsperson, who is very important in safeguarding human rights and the standards we have achieved in human rights. We are also, I mean, the parliaments are forums of ideas, are counterbalance to the executive, and is a true reflection of political will of the people, since both those in power and those in opposition are included. On the European level, also national parliaments play a very important role through committees of parliament that deal with European issues, but also we have an annual gathering, well, the biannual gathering called COSAC, which is the Conference of Committees of National Parliaments that deal with EU affairs, which proves to be a forum of ideas, debates of current affairs, but also challenges before the Union, and is actually a very interesting forum of exchange of ideas and views how we should move forward, because we must take into account that as we like to say, that the European Union, we are united in diversity. And we must keep in mind that different countries have different problems, which are very specific. And sometimes the best way to hear about those problems and perspectives are parliamentarians, who also have the ability to push motions, support motions and initiatives towards the European Commission, towards the European Parliament, and of course towards the national governments. Now, that being said, attempts to marginalize parliaments are a common trait of all politicians with dictatorial leanings. I mean, look at Poland, look at Hungary. I will not repeat myself, but I would like to stress an importance of one institution that sometimes goes overlooked, and that is the oldest European institution, which is pan-European. It's not connected directly to the European Union, called Council of Europe. The Parliamentary Assembly is doing tremendous work, is really doing, is being a watchdog of human rights, and helps actually countries which have lost their way to go back to guarding the standards of human rights and the rule of law that has been achieved. To put my contribution in a nutshell, I would say that a strong parliament is a guarantee for a strong democracy, and that is why national parliaments and European Parliament as well, of course, are very important.
Thank you very much. And as you were speaking, just to let you know, I was focused. I was having to just manage a few technological issues there. But I do indeed, again, for all those who may be tweeting, I do come back to your very opening comment that indeed Parliament is the watchdogs of democracy. And thank you also for laying out some of the other ways in which this safeguarding takes place and what your views are on that. And for your patience, because you've come absolutely last. So I am going to keep things short, ladies and gentlemen. It's quite a challenge because we are at 8 minutes past 8. I cannot bring this in later than 8:30 because we will lose people. So good people of the second panel, I'm going to throw a few questions at you, but you can all come on screen. You can all, or as many of you as we can have on screen together at the same time. Ladies and gentlemen of the audience, you've sent in some questions on Facebook, and I would like to pose just some of those questions. But as you know, my lovely speakers, it really has to be a 30-second answer. You are trapped in a lift with, well, Trump or someone else, okay? So what do we have here? We have Gabrielle here. Very important question to ask. You're going to have to keep it lovely and concise. Gabrielle, there you are. I see you. What European identity, in 2 sentences, I know it's huge, and is it a necessary reality to ensure stronger European solidarity and a transfer union that Nicolas didn't like the sound of, but anyway, a transfer union. And that question comes from Ben. What's European identity? Is it a really necessary reality to ensure European solidarity? Thank you.
Yes, it is. And for me, European identity is that we together, the citizens of Europe, have the expectations that this project is delivering for them, for better lives, for better working conditions, and that we set these standards together. We don't compete against each other. We are in this boat together, and we develop a good life for everyone together.
Thank you. I just muted myself as you were there. Thank you very much for that, for kicking off the Facebook questions. I'm now going to come to Christoph, if I may. There's a question that came in here from Matus, which came in on Facebook, Christoph, and the question is, how do we ensure, we've heard this already, and it was spoken of in that opening video by Sergei, that the crisis is being used by some in a way that crushes people's rights in an undemocratic way? How can we ensure that the COVID-19 crisis doesn't cause a rise of nationalism, but is the opportunity that Iratxe spoke about at the outset?
We can't. We have to, but we can't. The main question is the egoism of states, and because each state doesn't want some control about its action, it leads autocratic power going on with bad decision for democracy. And perhaps one of the main response, it's in link with a previous contribution, is to give money to local authorities and regions to support direct projects to people, and to keep local authorities, cities and regions as areas of resistance in front of autocratic power. To be concrete, just support local actors when they choose other values and to defend democracy.
Thank you. So you started off by saying we can't, but we can if we do that. But I absolutely, I understand. You're saying let's be realistic, but here is one way that we can really fight if we really focus on the local level. You use the word resistance there, which is very timely given the day that we mark today. So I'm going to come to Alicia now. Alicia, I think it might be a very obvious question, a good one that's come from Michal. How can we ensure that the voice of young people is better heard in the institutions? We hear this a lot, but how can we ensure that it's better heard, and also that those institutions grant the young people greater importance?
Well, so first I would like to thank to Michal for this really good question. And to be brief and short, I think that the political participation is like a two-way street. So in the first hand, we have that the young Europeans that needs to be organized in order to participate in politics through political organizations as yes, but you also have the students' organizations or the youth sections in trade unions. But I think that being organized is a thing that is needed in order to make a stronger the voice on the demands. And on the other hand, we also need the institutions creating those spaces to make these organizations and these people be heard. And also, I think that a good point could be putting the youth policies also as a transversal policy that will make them feel more important and more, and the policies will go also in the good way. So to be brief.
Thank you, but brief is good because that's what people take away. And thank you again, very, very concrete. And I'm treating this like a real TV show, and I'm moving swiftly on now. If I could come to Klára, if I may. There you are. There are a lot of questions, obviously, around this. Okay, so the first one, I'm just going to tell you what was asked because you touched upon it, okay? But it was really asking, how can the EU sanction what's going on? And you talked about it yourself without encouraging a new exit. So I don't know, that's just if you wanted to add anything to the approach that you say is the one that you feel is what Europe needs to be presenting. And also, how can Europe act further to prevent the collapse of democracy in Poland and Hungary? So it's a kind of an extension of your opening answer. If you can keep it lovely and brief, I'd be so grateful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Well, I don't think you should be afraid of a hook sit, so to say. According to all surveys, Hungarian people are most pro-European people in the whole union, even after 10 years of brainwash politics of Orbán. You cannot take away the European identity, as Gabi talked about, from the Hungarian people. So they are slightly different than, for example, the Brits. But on the other hand, I have a lot of time wasted in the past few years protecting the authority of the European Union, because the majority of my citizens back in Hungary are asking, why is the European Union not doing anything? So if I can say a final remark, is that the Treaty of Rome is stating that ever closer union. What I would like to add is to have an ever stronger union who is able to protect its own European citizens with European identity, even sometimes from their corrupt or anti-democratic government. That would be the goal what I'm fighting for.
Beg your pardon, ladies and gentlemen, I mute myself when you're speaking. So thank you. And so you are for an ever stronger rather than ever closer union, and very encouraging actually to hear your response. Actually, the citizens of those countries are they are believers in democracy. They do look to the EU. So you are encouraged by that. I think that's very interesting. Perhaps an unexpected answer, but that question came from Martha. So thank you very much, Martha, if you are still looking. So a last couple of questions, if I may. I'm going to come to Dominic. Hello there, you are in the middle. And the question has come from Tim for you. Europe has long been lacking in common decision-making, so it's a key problem. You talked about some of the things that you think constitutionally need changing. How to renew and strengthen the European fellowship between the EU and well, between the EU member states. Have you frozen? Maybe we have a technical problem. Okay, I'm going to leave that question hanging in the air, and I'm going to come to the lovely gentleman who is our very last speaker. And that is Domagoj Hajdukovic. Welcome back to you. You have a question from Michal, which has come in. And the question is the following. Democracy has been shaken in Croatia for a long time, especially in this crisis. The Prime Minister makes some very dictatorial decisions with the Civil Protection Directorate, political decisions, but also defense of fascist symbols. Does Croatia move into violation of the rule of law like Hungary and Poland? You've heard what Klára said, some very interesting thoughts there. And how can it be prevented?
Yes, unfortunately, I must say that Croatia is sliding on a way that Hungary and Poland have already trodden.
Okay.
Unfortunately, in the last 4 years, with this conservative government, we have seen a blatant disregard of institutions, which should oversee the transparency of government. We have seen the attempts to marginalize parliament. As I was saying before, parliaments are the lifeblood of democracy, and such ways are very harmful to democracy. In the last 4 years, the PM has not only tolerated, but also silently promoted fascist symbols and even encouraged them, because even inaction is an action, and unfortunately has contributed to the culture of fascist nostalgia thriving in Croatia, unfortunately. And we are talking about fascism and fascism nostalgia on the day that the fascism was defeated.
Yeah.
In the last 4 years, I will give you just a few more examples. Out of 21 ministers, 15 had left the government, most of them because of allegations of corruption. Now, what can you expect from such a PM? We in the Progressive family have been very vocal on the subject, not only in our parliament, but also on other forums provided to parliamentarians. And in the words of famous song, maybe the winds of change are actually blowing, since we are facing very, very soon parliamentary elections, probably at the beginning of July. And hopefully the citizens of Croatia will be able to have their say, and actually to punish the government by their votes, which has taken such a blatant disregard for human rights, for rule of law, for institutions, for all the democracy actually stands for. So hopefully next time we'll meet, and hopefully in person, I will have better news.
Thank you very much. And I think that those were your words. Hopefully people in the democratic process, that was the quote, will punish the government by their votes. And also a very important point you made there, that inaction is in itself an action. So thank you very much. I'm going to swiftly go back now because I believe you're back with us. Dominic, can you wave? There you are. You were frozen before. I thought you were just being very still, but you'd actually disappeared. So Dominic, here's a question from Tim, which is Europe has been lacking in common decision-making for some time. It's a key problem. So how do we renew and strengthen the European fellowship? It's a nice word, fellowship, between the EU member states.
Well, I think we have to go back to the roots. No, today we are holding this seminar because it is also the 70th tomorrow, the 70th anniversary of the Schuman Declaration, and many people like to quote from the Schuman Declaration that Europe will not be created in a single act, that it will come out as the creation or as a result of the creation of de facto solidarities. And this is true, but we should not forget the second part of the idea, which was that the foundation of the European community of coal and steel was the first step for a European federation. And in this, I want to echo what Brando said before. We need to further federalize our union in order to strengthen the fellowship, as Tim said, very well said indeed, among member states, and also to strengthen the powers of the most representative institution, which is the parliament. I'm also echoing what our friend from Croatia was saying. And also, I think we have an opportunity to strengthen something that is often overlooked, which is the cultural and educational dimension of European integration. We cannot appeal, and I know Klára knows that very well, we cannot appeal to the best feelings and sentiments of the people only by talking about institutions or policies. We have also to appeal to their best sentiments, and we can do that through culture and education.
Forgive me there for that lapse. I was just unmuting myself. Thank you very much. You make a very, very, very important last point there. That is how you appeal. That is how you appeal intellectually. That is how you appeal emotionally. So I've heard an awful lot there. And just to say to you, because there was an important point that did come in, of course, we've heard about the importance of the local level, of local stories, of local support, but also that word local authorities. That's not a word that came up, but they are also very, very, very important in that vanguard. You spoke of resistance there, Christophe, but they are absolutely critical in terms of balancing with governments that are not respecting people's rights, democracy and the rule of law. So, oh my God, so many things that we couldn't even unpack. I really do thank all of you. We looked at the treaties, we looked at the constitutional side, we looked at what Europe needs to do, get tougher, but also incentivize through campaigns that speak out to people locally, to that overused phrase, to the hearts and minds. So we discussed that. We heard about the importance of the Agora and the feedback loop. And we heard of some very concrete ways in which young people who have been particularly affected, and not just because there's a crisis, but need to be included. How do they take their place? And how is their place respected by the institutions? So much food for thought for people to take away this evening and into the weekend. I thank you all so very much, and for the fact that I couldn't have longer with all of you. So you may disconnect and be free. Klára, your 5-year-old can now come and hug its mummy. You can come out of that locked room. So thank you very much. That is a wrap for that panel, ladies and gentlemen. We do have one more fabulous speaker who has been listening, who is going to do a kind of a round off of proceedings before I then just come up and close things off. So, there you are, the lovely Miriam Dalli, who is, of course, Vice President for the European Green Deal. We've heard a lot about that this evening, and of communications. So perhaps you can do us the honor of saying some inspiring and thoughtful words for the end of our event. Thank you, Miriam.
Thank you. I hope they will be inspiring. Thanks a lot. Good evening to you and to all people that are following us. And let me start by thanking everyone who participated today. and all the people who have been following us as well. And thank you for bringing these people together, because ultimately this showed that even though we're in different countries, even though we're in different parts of the European Union, we can come together and debate different ideas. I had a lot of interesting things tonight, and I have to say I share a number of the issues that were brought forward. What we definitely understand, all of us, is that we are living in unprecedented times. And this year's Europe Day has a significant meaning, because it means that we need to change, that things can't remain the same. And if there is one very strong lesson that we are learning from this pandemic, is that we need to have solidarity. It needs to be concrete solidarity. It needs to bring us all together wherever we are around the European Union. It has to be solidarity when it comes to economic issues. It has to be solidarity when it comes to health issues. It has to be solidarity when it comes to migration. It has to be solidarity to ensure that we give an opportunity to everyone. And this should be the European Union of all. It can't be the European Union of the big member states versus the small member states, or of the north versus the south, east versus west, poor versus rich. It has to be the European Union of each and every one of us. And I'm proud to say that we as socialists and democrats work very hard on this particular principle, because we do not want to have policies that leave anyone behind. So when we talk about an economic recovery, and a lot of the speakers tonight spoke about an economic recovery, honestly, there can be no true recovery without having solidarity. It has to be meaningful solidarity. It has to be a solidarity that directly supports those who lost their jobs in this pandemic, those whose place of employment had to be shut down, those, for example, who are in the culture, arts, tourism, and whose income has suddenly stopped, the sick and the vulnerable, whose situation only worsened as a result of this pandemic. But as socialists, we always fought for a social Europe, a fair one. And we are today fighting for a Europe that leaves no one behind, understanding that in this European Union, well, sadly now of 27 member states, each country has its own responsibility and its own burden to share. But it cannot also be carried out by one member state or the other, or a couple of member states, but it has to be the responsibility of the European Union as a whole. So we cannot talk of solidarity without speaking about the issue of irregular migration, for example. We have to protect lives, and this means that we have to continue pushing for a mandatory fair sharing of responsibility from everyone, not just the frontier member states or a couple of member states. And as I mentioned, and the number of speakers mentioned this as well, this pandemic has taught us some really good lessons, some less good lessons, but there is one fundamental lesson that comes out. We are very quick to adapt to change, and we have seen this happening. I mean, this event is just one clear example of that. And we managed to change when we fully understood the impact on our own health. So it took a pandemic to clear the air, for example, and fully see how densely polluted our cities are. It took a pandemic to continue exposing the vulnerabilities and the suffering of many EU citizens. And it took a crisis to understand that things have actually to change. And I cannot stop underlining this enough. We cannot go back to how things were. So we cannot go back to business as usual. And you mentioned the European Green Deal. I believe that our future lies in the European Green Deal. A Green Deal that can help foster economic growth, that can help social protection being enhanced, create jobs, fight precarious employment, push for gender equality and investment, and a Green Deal that really protects our environment. Because ultimately, after this pandemic, we definitely need to invest in our economies, but we need to make sure that we invest in the right direction. So we need to invest in sustainable development, help with green buildings, help countries improve their infrastructure, help invest in efficiency, in research, in development. It has to be a Green Deal that brings out sustainability in everything we do, where it makes our economies, our societies resilient for future crises. I believe that the European Green Deal can make really our societies future-proof. But there is one very important thing. We have to stop reacting to crisis. We need to be proactive. And I think that if there is something that maybe we were lacking in the past, is this reactionary approach. We need to be more proactive than ever before. I will not take a lot of your time, but I believe we are living historic times, and this is another period that will go down in history. So let's make sure that with all the ideas that we heard tonight, we can go really in the right direction and make this crisis come up with something really positive for all of us, and that we change direction and we take the right decisions to really go down in history together in a positive way. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. I think those are very good last words, so that we go down in history in a very positive way, because look, at the start of this, that's what we evoked, the history. That is what the absolute, the hook has been for this, and we're quoting from 70 years ago, so you are absolutely right. Those are good words to end on. Thank you very much. Stay with me if you will. Stay with me. I'll ask you to stay with me. Pierre will keep you with me as I just say goodbye to our lovely audience. So we have reached the end of this 70th anniversary of Schuman celebration. I really hope you enjoyed it. I know we scratched the surface of so many things, and you know, time constraints, particularly online, dictate that we can't go into the details given the amount of panelists and fabulous panelists that take something into tomorrow and throughout your whole weekend. Let me just thank all of my speakers, including your good self, Miriam, for joining us this evening. Let me please thank the S&D group for organising this. That organising team was quite considerable. They did some very hard work, not just our technician Pierre, but the comms people, the policy people, the social media people. It's quite a baptism of fire for everybody, including myself. So thank you very much. And that solidarity, it really is about people, and that democracy really is a frame of mind. So I leave you with those words. I thank you all very, very much for joining me. Have a fabulous evening, a delightful weekend, and perhaps until the next time. Thank you very much. Good evening.